Hello, good morning. We are very happy to have you here. This is Rethinking Europe's East-West Divide, our network launch conference. First, I would like to introduce myself and my wonderful partners in crime. So my name is Emilija Gateva. I'm a lecturer in European Union politics here at the Department of Politics and International Relations. And we have Emilija Rone, who is an associate researcher at the Cambridge Institute for the Study of Democracy and Technology. And she will soon make a very exciting move to the Netherlands and will start a new and exciting job. And we have Emilija Tudzarovska. She's a lecturer at the Czech University in Prague, but also research fellow at the Czech Academy of Social Sciences, and basically we have embarked on a journey together since September. We decided to join forces. Emilija provided the spark, and then we decided to go and apply for some funding to get the network up and running. We are very successful to have been awarded UASIS network funding for this first year, and the conference is very much supported by UASIS, but I'm also delighted to say that we have managed to secure funding from the Department of Politics and International Relations at Oxford, European Studies Centre at Oxford, CSOX, which is Southeastern Europe Studies at Oxford, OSCE, which is the Department of Global Studies, Oxford School of Global Studies at Oxford. So I think that this is very much all the institutions that are supporting us, and I can tell you a lot about bridging institutional divides, having become very popular with at least 4 finance departments. As you can imagine, I'm absolutely thrilled to see you all here. We have a very, not just one, 2 exciting days that will lead to fascinating discussions. So what is the plan for the first day? So we have, well, obviously this is the introduction. We'll have a chance to tell you a little bit more about the network. We'll open the floor and have a discussion about what membership entails, so how we are imagining what being a member of the network means, what are the possibilities, how to grow and develop the network, and obviously consider different funding opportunities to sustain the viability of this very exciting research group. And then we have our first 3 panels today. So we have a panel, the next one on rethinking Europe's East-West divide. Then we have panel 2, political economy of Central and Eastern Europe, and panel 3, counter-democracy in Central and Eastern Europe. And so here we're going to present draft chapters. This is an edited book volume, and Emilija will tell you more about it. So this will be a presentation for the first drafts for this edited volume on the politics of Central and Eastern Europe in comparative perspectives. And then we have 4 exciting panels that are more discussion panels. So the first one that we'll have today is, well, the last panel for today is the digital transition in comparative perspective. And then tomorrow we will continue with the theme of rethinking Europe's East-West divide. We have the first panel tomorrow morning is about risks to representative democracy in the European Union. And then we will talk about rethinking Europe's East-West divide, 20 years since the Big Bang enlargement. I mean, again, we're just ahead of the anniversary. Everybody's gearing up for the 1st of May. We're ahead of the curve. And then we'll have an opportunity to also talk about rethinking Europe's East-West divide and European integration in a new geopolitical era. And the final concluding session, in a way, we will return to some of the key points that we would have raised during our discussions in numerous panels, but obviously we will come back to you with ideas and suggestions on what to do next, how to grow and develop the network, and to ensure its long-term sustainability. So that's all from me for now, and I will move on and let Julia talk a little bit more about our intellectual rationale.
Thank you very much. First of all, huge thanks to Ellie for organizing everything in Oxford. This has been a major effort, so very big thanks. And yeah, I'm going to share a presentation, even though I think this is not even maybe a presentation material, but just to help us structure our thought and the discussions in the next 2 days. Basically, the first thing I want to very briefly mention is at least why my interest in East-West politics has emerged, and I guess I would be very interested to hear in the coming minute of the introduction also why would you be interested in it, each of you, or not, what work you have done or could be doing on the topic. So I'll start with my personal story, and then I would be very happy to hear actually also each of you basically with reflections on whether this makes sense or not. So for me, the interest in bridging the East-West divide basically came from my PhD, where I was studying the social movements of the crisis, so the post-financial crisis mobilization all across Europe, and I was trying to figure out why countries in Western Europe and in Eastern Europe have very different responses to the crisis, why austerity was such a prominent topic in Southern Europe, so in countries such as Spain, Italy, France, Greece, and in Eastern Europe, where we had very severe austerity measures. The protests that we saw were slightly different. They focused on topics such as corruption, and Diana is the absolute specialist in this field. They were very much centered in each individual country with a lack of common narrative about things that were happening all across CE. And for me, this was absolutely fascinating. So in my PhD, I was studying more diffusion studies and trying to figure out why protests fail to diffuse. Then a second major source of inspiration has been the Conflict of Sovereignty project, and that was a major project led by Natalie Brack, Ramona Kuman, Martin Crispy, and Chris Bickerton, the first three in Brussels, Bickerton in Cambridge, that was trying to compare conflicts of sovereignty in Eastern and Western Europe, looking at cases such as Brexit or the rebellion against TTIP, but also at the rule of law conflicts in countries such as Poland and Hungary. And what I find very interesting about this project is that it was incredibly ambitious, and it has, at least for me, been an absolute major intellectual source. But still, I think there we failed to bridge the East-West divide. So we looked at Brexit alone, and we looked at the Central and Eastern European cases alone, but there was not maybe very targeted attempt to really compare what's going on. And I think this is very much a direction in which several of the authors are going now. Then a third topic that I, at least in my career, have encountered as very interesting is emigration. And here I really want to recommend the work of Anna Kiriazi and Mariana Mendes, who work basically on Southern Europe and Eastern Europe and try to see how emigration has become a very prominent political topic there, and with them we have studied, basically we have tried to set up a research agenda for studying a problem that's major in CE and is yet very much under researched in Western European political science due to the fact that their immigration is a bigger problem. And then finally, with Amy, our co-organizer, we wrote a chapter on weakening of parliaments, which was actually completely Amy's idea. I heard the presentation, of course, actually at our conference on conflicts of sovereignty. And I was absolutely struck by her ambition to compare things that are happening in Eastern and Western Europe in terms of parliamentary weakening. So she can tell a bit and a lot more about it for sure. But so for me, just all these topics have led really to the deep conviction that we should study Eastern and Western European politics together, or at least the structural connections between them. And the work of Ellie on European integration and democratization or de-democratization, I think, is absolutely case in point as well. So basically this whole project started as a group project with Bloomsbury. And I'll very briefly just give updates for the ones who participate in the book project and not bore everyone else. So we had 8 reviews, which was very intimidating, and they were actually mainly positive. So it seems that the book will go forward, fingers crossed. Now it needs to go through final editorial meetings. And there are some advice on how to do the chapters, but I think I will keep this for the next sessions, which are more specifically for the book. And just I want to raise some questions with my co-organizers. We have discussed this, and maybe you will have ideas. Yeah, so shall we try? So the book that was mentioned is very much a state-of-the-art research for like pedagogical purposes, but it's not novel research. So one thing that we have been discussing is, shall we try to also apply for special issues and promote novel research, which explicitly aims to compare Central and Eastern European political cases, or study diffusion processes, etc. So I guess the implicit answer is yes, maybe. Let's hope. So yeah, any ideas in this direction are very welcome, and hopefully this conference will spark a lot of new ideas and potential collaborations. And last thing, just some practical things to be kept in mind and also discussed tomorrow. So we will give this basically form that I completely destroyed in my bag, so it doesn't look very representable, but there you can write your name, email, etc. if you would like to be included in a mailing list where we will share news and events that basically the network is organizing. And we need to discuss basically also what does the membership of the network entail? And this is, I think, again, something that is up for all of us to decide. So will it be just organizing events? Shall we try to apply for funding to do more stuff? Do we have a membership for people who are just interested, and then for people who actually want to be more hands-on and do things? Again, topic for all of us to discuss. And this comes together with the previous question of like, shall we try to organize next conferences? The answer is for sure yes. Both Emmy and I have expressed interest, even though I must say, observing Ellie's heroic effort in Oxford, I now am a bit intimidated. But yeah, so these are the practical things to be kept in mind. And I actually had a last minute idea also this morning, and maybe that's stupid and maybe it would work. Maybe we can do a potential list of relevant publications that do cross this East-West divide. I'm thinking here, for example, of everything that Vishnia has done, because I tried to compile the list yesterday, and I was writing book of 200, 2024, 23, etc. In the end, I wrote everything. But yeah, so maybe we can have such a list. Far-right studies have such a list, and they popularize work on Twitter, and I think for each of the people featured on the list, that might be actually a useful way to A, promote their work, and B, promote this general, let's say, direction of research. But yeah, so these are just random ideas. And yeah, final question maybe for tomorrow, whom to attract and how to attract more academics based in CEE. I think that's a very important question, especially with this ambition. And then how to attract Western European academics in order to avoid preaching to the converted, because of course all of us from CEE are convinced that what happens in our region is extremely important, and it's very similar to what happens to Western European politics. But as I think all of us have encountered in the process of teaching, and Ellie told me an absolutely fascinating anecdote when we first discussed this, and Emmy as well, Western European academics are not so convinced maybe of the productivity of studying these regions together. So yeah, these are just some very basic few questions to consider together. And that's it. Thank you very much. And I give the floor to Emmy.
Thank you very much. I haven't held a mic for a very long time. Good morning, and thank you all for coming here today. And thank you again for organizing this, and thanks to ISIS for giving us the platform to express some different views from the usual mainstream. I would like to start with where actually Julia has ended, why there is a need for rethinking East-West divide. And not only in my own work, but from many much long-term scholars who have been working on this field, especially historians, and we're lucky to have one here today, have already identified that there is a need of reinterpretation of how history was made and written in the past period, especially in the 2 decades. One of the reasons is why and how Western scholars have been making these interpretations of history of Central European states. And now, with all that is happening in this new geopolitical context, there is an identification that there is a need for new lenses of how to make this, at least to understand what is happening, hopefully to recommend some work in the future. I personally come also from practical field. I have been practitioner before I rejoined academia. So my thinking is at the end that if we are able to produce any new perspectives or recommendations that might help someone to make better decisions in this new geopolitical context of the European Union, for the citizens in general in territory or threatened by the war or any sort of experience, then we will do a good job. So that will be the end result of this, I hope. The second perspective is that I personally come from North Macedonia. And I have been working on the EU enlargement process for a very long time. And when I think of the EU enlargement, I'm not thinking only from the perspective of Big Bang enlargement. I'm thinking now that all the processes of transformations that have been made to the states and the political systems in the Central European states, in the candidate member states, in future candidate member states, that are in some level reduce the resilience of the state, how to address global problems. And this is another perspective why we'll talk tomorrow on the EU enlargement from the perspective of the Big Bang, but also I would like, and I hope we will also discuss the candidate member states, not only from the Western Balkan perspectives, but also now for the Ukraine case in the forthcoming. And the third thing that I would like to mention, of course, this also, my idea also for this rethinking East-West divide is coming from comparing cases. In my aim to understand how the European Union works, I have been comparing cases from West and East, and I have identified very many similarities with many similar outcomes, unfortunately, to the rest of the representative democracies, and I would like to know why. Of course, I cannot do this by myself. There are many brilliant scholars out there, and we would like to give them a platform to express their opinions, to share their views, to encourage them to think from a comparative perspective. Of course, it's not easy to make comparative cases or to have a comparative approach, but nothing good has come from easy. We have to stretch ourselves. So I would like to encourage everyone out there who will somehow get informed about our network to encourage themselves to write to us, to approach us, to express their views. And jointly, I hope we will deliver something more than this book, because we have here the potential to express much more than just publications that maybe it will remain in the circle of academia. I personally would like to bridge not only East and West divide, but also for the practical world and the academia, so it makes sense what we work at the end, rather than just to listen to ourselves. So thank you very much again for joining us today, and hope we will have fruitful discussions in 2 days.
I would just like to highlight a few more points about my motivations for studying Eastern and Central Europe, Western and Eastern Europes together. Having studied EU enlargement, one thing that I have found particularly annoying is that we will have 2 decades since 8 Central and Eastern European countries together with Malta and Cyprus joined, and they have been continuously referred to as new member states. So this has been, I find it quite peculiar how long it takes to graduate from being a new member state of the European Union, but also the bulk of the literature reinforces this kind of asymmetric power relationship, when reality on the ground is that we have developed a much more complex but relationship of mutual interdependence. So that's why when Julia approached me for this project, this was one of the first things that immediately came to mind, that we tend to perhaps neglect or push aside this complex level of interaction, and some of the literature tends to reproduce perhaps an oversimplified approaches and narratives to studying the influence of the European Union or the influence of European integration, that are particularly limiting and also very much contradict empirical reality on the ground. And the second thing is, which I have also found quite fascinating with the state of the literature, is that there is this kind of case selection bias. So we will get cases that will disproportionately attract a lot of attention for a number of good reasons, and I'm sure you can think of at least two more recent cases in among Central and Eastern European countries that have disproportionately attracted a lot of attention, and this kind of tends to be painted as a broad brush for the whole region, and we are all aware here that this is definitely not the case, but I find particularly problematic the fact that positive cases or more nuanced cases tend to get neglected and forgotten. So this will be something that we will talk to a little bit more in the next panel and session. And then, I started thinking when we started talking about it, obviously more than 30 years since the fall of the Berlin Wall, technically this year 35. We have the big anniversary, 20 years since the accession of 10 member states, almost doubling the size of the European Union. We also have, I think it's not two other important, they say 2024 is the year of elections, but it's also quite important for anniversaries, I would say as well. We have 20 years since the Orange Revolution. We also have 20 years since the re-election of Putin back in 2004. But we also have 10 years since the Maidan Square revolution. And this is also the 10th anniversary of Russia's seizure of Crimea. We have 10 years since the Scottish independence referendum, and you would be surprised, time flies. I've realized I've lost a decade. So it is quite fascinating. But we also have other important anniversaries in the region, and we will have 25 years since NATO bombing of Serbia. And then obviously with things for 4 years since Brexit, more recent anniversaries, and 2 years since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Clearly the world of yesterday, or the world as we know it, not just of 2 decades ago, is no longer with us, and we need to confront these new realities. And I think that this needs to be reflected in our scholarship, and why our scholarship is important, not just for having these very exciting conversations among academics, but as Emmy was saying, what and how we research has important implications for what we teach. What we teach shapes the next generation of scholars, policymakers, and practitioners. So clearly this is a very, very important and much beyond the scope of an edited project or an edited book, because, we'd like to think that our most important contribution to the field is our research, but I think we need to be humble and acknowledge that in most cases, our most important contribution is our teaching and service to the next generation. So this makes a massive and important difference. And I think that that's why one of our aims and objectives is also to provide a platform for voices and support for scholars who are based in Central and Eastern Europe, and as ambitiously as it sounds, shape the next generations of scholars, or contribute to the development, not just of exciting new literature, but also the emergence of a new generation of scholars. Yeah, so very ambitious, here we are, and not beating around the bush, and we will have an opportunity to talk more about it today, but I think that's all from me in terms of motivations and rationale.
Thank you very much. I will just very quickly jump in to provide 2 anecdotes, and before that I just also want to thank Amy for bringing up this policy element, and for you to emphasize this, because actually in my thinking this is something that's very absent, so I'm very glad there are such professional people on the team. But two anecdotes. The first one is by Emilija, so I will quote her while she's next to me. When we were discussing the book project, she mentioned teaching politics, comparative politics, and saying that I might misquote you now, but you will correct me, so no fake news. While teaching comparative politics, she mentioned that what we see in the UK during Brexit was also a very clear example of like de-democratization and like very problematic liberal forces at play, at which point the student pushed back and said, no, but this is completely different. And a very similar thing occurred to me. I was I was at a conference, I was among the audience, and Ramona Kuman and Cecile Leconte dared to compare what's happening in Poland and Hungary with Austria. And then someone very indignantly said, but Austria is a completely different case. They're uncomparable. And I think stories like this show really the necessity of having a network such as this one, because these cases are comparable and should be compared. And Eli mentioned all these anniversaries, and I was just thinking, I had no idea about them actually, but I was thinking, what has changed in these years? Indeed, also the Scottish referendum for me was 2 reasons, or 10 years sounds a lot. What has changed really in Central and Eastern Europe? Have we seen a convergence between the East and the West? And unfortunately, my intuition is that if we have seen any convergence, it's towards, the West becoming more and more illiberal, de-democratizing, etc. So, interesting questions to discuss. If Emmy has something more to say, that's great. And if afterwards we want to, just have a brief discussion, that would be
I think we can continue these discussions among us, so we can get to know each other, and then we will also discuss some of these uncomparable cases which are comparable in the work we have done in the second panel. And we can also demonstrate, and we have demonstrated also in our work, that not only that the cases are comparable, that we also need to try to shift this perspective coming from Western scholarship, that we do ours and you do yours. And I have been witnessing this for many years now. And the point is not to express any intellectual capacity, whether we can or we cannot compare. The point is to understand how European Union function in overall, because these people are also shaping someone's policies and someone's lives in the end. So if we somehow manage to shift the perspective how to think, not only how to produce, I will be happy. So I hope this, and I again thank to Lysis, because it's a large platform to give us this opportunity to express ourselves, and I'm very much looking forward to listen all of you what have to share and have to say. I know many have done an amazing job and amazing research that needs to be discovered, and unfortunately I will say this, probably sharing the same views as ours. Academia have become a strange field that if you're not published immediately somewhere in a high-end journal, it should not be read or that should not be considered, which is not true. There are plenty of nice, of course, there are standards that have to be followed. There is a reason why you are getting published. I understand that perspective. But there are also a lot of nice things are coming from just sharing your work in progress, sharing your thoughts, shaping these thoughts. Even if you not get published, you can be having brilliant ideas that can shape someone's work. So I think at the end, the interaction is what counts. So not to get lonely in any room where you do your amazing academic work and nobody has heard about it because you're not published. So I hope that we will also use our breaks to get to know each other and to share our perspectives. So thank you again, and we will continue with the next session.
Or maybe we can also have some discussion. I don't know what's the time.
Yeah, no, I think we have time. We are doing well for time. We have 20 minutes, and we can open the floor now. And we have an opportunity to share thoughts and suggestions for what we want to do.
I'd be very happy to bring the mic. I don't know whether this one is switched on.
All of them are switched on.
Okay,
Yeah,
perfect.
yes,
Because a lot of you are already doing this work, so please, feel free to share thoughts, questions, comments, emotional outbursts, desperation, or hopes. I have a microphone and I can bring it to whoever wants to speak. the protest leader immediately.
That was in the. It's working?
I think so.
I think I
No?
don't turn it on.
I think it's, yeah.
Good idea.
It should have been turned on.
Oh, no.
So then the microphone.
No. It's not working.
No?
I can bring it up.
Okay.
Unless it works so well that we don't hear the difference. I actually didn't.
Maybe we can. Well, that was in the past before 10 years.
And is it okay if you introduce, because we are a small group of scholars, if you would like to first introduce yourself for the benefit of the audience?
Important question. Do we stop the recording or do we keep the question and answer? Recording?
Okay, we can stop.
Is there anyone who would not like to be recorded for the question and answer session? If yes, don't feel shy, please tell us. If not, we will just. And you can change your mind after.
Yeah, you can change your mind and then we can have it.
Yeah, that's why I'm editing my presentation with first page about myself, because it's like the introduction of you was more about like more personal. Like everyone probably is good to share something about themselves in the beginning. So I'm a postdoc in Berlin in Center of East European International Studies, but also I'm affiliated to Trade Union Institute in Bulgaria and research coordinator of project about collective bargaining and trade unions in European Union. We're comparing the 7 countries. So it's very within the perspective you shared. My first impression is like when you start about this comparison between East and West, being part of two traditions in science. So I study ethnography, history, anthropology, but then political science, a lot of statistical analysis. So there are very different words. And when we think about comparison, the first thing is large and comparison and small case comparison. In small case tradition, I think this comparison between East and West, like qualitative analysis, mostly done on area studies or specific small cases within specific region. While in large and analysis, the problem is when you are comparing them comparable. Like there are a lot of criticism about quantitative political science, where the comparison is even not Europe but the whole world, like public opinion research about everything. And there are a lot of criticism coming from qualitative studies, while here the floor is open about more the criticism on qualitative studies that some cases cannot be compared because Austria is not the same as Hungary, for example. So probably the key for this network and for the research is this balance between the two traditions and the problems within the two traditions. I don't know how much papers are using quantitative data, but there the tradition is usually really large and without keeping by the context difference, the historical tradition, while in a small case analysis, they are usually within similar contexts, within similar countries. So probably here will be one of the questions about the paradigms, about saying something new, something different. I don't have answer, just emotional reaction. Just remembering that when my first emotion when I start statistical analysis was, oh my God, you cannot compare so many different countries, being before they're doing ethnography and history. But then I moved to middle range theory to compare several cases. So I don't know, maybe there is some of the answer about comparing middle range number of countries with similar cases of outcome or similarity in the context.
Yeah, thank you. Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm Ivo Iliev. I'm from a PhD at the European University Institute in Florence. And I also wanted to react to the anecdote you told me, because I'm researching the software industry in Eastern Europe. And when I present my first research proposal in Florence at a colloquium, And I was suggesting to compare countries from the Western Balkans and the Eastern Balkans, and somebody immediately reacted and said, "No, you can't do this. How can you compare Serbia to Bulgaria and Albania to Romania, whatever? Because they had war and whatnot." And I was like, "Yeah, but I actually can. I mean, and it has been really a good intellectual stimulus to actually study." And compare cases that usually aren't lumped together. And there is a lot in this, let's say, case study tradition, really a lot of case selection bias, in that everybody studies their preferred country or their country of origin as well. And I'm a political economist, so this is especially the case in political economy. So there are people who just spend their entire career writing about Sweden, and somehow Sweden is the embodiment of, and the perfect case that illustrates every theory. But then or Germany, this is the other preferred case. Or people who write about Central and Eastern Europe somehow only write about Poland and Hungary, like not even the Visegrad states, but Poland and Hungary. And then somehow Poland and Hungary seem to embody everything that there is to know about Central and Eastern Europe. And somehow they seem to fit all the theories. And then at some point you realize that, people actually work the other way around, so they devise theories that fit their preferred cases. So I think really broadening the geographical focus per se already brings certain analytical, advantages. And if we bridge the divide, the East-West divide, it may help us really also think in analytical terms. But sometimes also the within Eastern divide is already hard to bridge. So it's a lot of things to unpack there. And I think what really prevents a lot of people from doing research on less known cases. I mean, first there is something as marketing there that is implicit to it. So certain cases are just more likely to get you published. Let's be honest about this.
Funding.
Or get you funding. Yes, exactly. With Eastern Europe, it is the case that certain cases only become salient after countries get bombed to rubble. I mean, this is the case with Ukraine. Like, all of a sudden, everybody reinvented themselves as, specialists on Ukraine, and then there are a lot of public interventions from people that really don't know anything about the country. And if you happen to know something about the country, you notice that immediately. But, this is Western Balkans. It was the same with Western Balkans 20 years ago. And so I think it's important to make clear to people that you can actually study a country without necessarily knowing the language. Like, I did research on Albania, for instance, without speaking a word of Albanian. I did field work in Romania. I did archival work in Romania. I didn't speak a word of Romanian. I just used Google Translate and DeepL. I mean, so if there is a will, there is a way. And I think if you want to sell our research agenda, we also have to make clear to people, you can do this. You can immerse yourself in a given context. I mean, knowing languages is an advantage. Knowing the history is an advantage. But it's not necessary. I mean, you can, if you're interested in a certain case, and if your case has analytical value, so if it is a good exemplification of a given theory, of a given analytical suggestion, then it is worth spending time researching that case. And even though the case study might not turn as detailed as it would if you speak the language and if you're more immersed in the context. So I think this kind of cultural thing that is involved here is also worth dwelling on as a thought. Yeah, I think I said a lot of things.
Yeah, just maybe a quick comment. Don't trust him when he says he does not know a language, because he's a linguistic genius who depresses everyone on Duolingo. But no, what I wanted to say is just very briefly in terms of this within-C distinction. Just a thought when we talk, for example, about social movements, and I think again Diana will have to say much more about this. But for me, what is absolutely fascinating is that Bulgaria and Romania are always mentioned together in every basically mentioning of these countries. But when, for example, one looks at movements of the crisis, etc., I was absolutely struck to realize that among Bulgarian activists there was very little awareness of what was going on in Romania at the exact same time. Not many connections, and maybe Balek has also more thoughts about this, and maybe this has changed. But at least 2013, 2014, it was absolute shock to me the zero almost level of communication between these two countries in terms of activism from below, etc. So we have also divides not only in the way we study countries but also on the ground in phenomena. And maybe I will put Vishnya on the spot to share.
Or if you could, we have a hand from Timothy.
Sorry.
Thanks very much. I'm Timothy Gavnash, and I've been trying to rethink the East-West divide for about 50 years, so I'm absolutely thrilled about this project, but I want to encourage you, Ellie said you were being ambitious, to be even more ambitious, more radical, and have, so to speak, the courage of your intellectual convictions. Because what we actually need to do is not just rethink the East-West divide, we have to dismantle it in our academic life. And so, you said 35 years from the Velvet Revolution, well, maybe start a Velvet Revolution in academia. So in what all three of you have been saying, there is a tension. On the one hand, you've used formulations like bridge the divide in academia, or I think you said comparison between CEE countries and West European countries. Now that implies that there is a unity of CEE, although in CEE itself implies a disunity, and a unity in Western Europe. This is no longer the case. It is simply absurd to think that Czech politics today have more in common with the politics of Belarus than they do with those of Austria. Estonian politics have to be compared with Finnish politics rather than with Serbian politics. And I think one of you said that contemporary populisms in France, or in the Netherlands, or in Britain, are eminently comparable, both in their etiology and their socioeconomic causes, and in their discourse and their cultural components, with those in Central Eastern and Southeastern Europe. So I think when you're embarking on this project and in the book, I would want to encourage you to be much clearer about what your agenda is. It's not just bringing together these two fields which have internal. It is dismantling that divide and saying that what we actually need to study is Europe as a whole in all its complexity and diversity. And I'll say a bit more about that tomorrow. Thanks. But it's a great project.
That's great, thank you. So we'll try to be more radical. Yeah.
Here you go. Sorry for putting you on the spot. But
Thanks a lot, Julia. You put me on the spot just when I was about to anyways raise my hand. So I'm Vishnya Vukov. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Vienna, and I previously worked in Barcelona, in Italy, did my PhD also at the EUI. And I'm a political economist, and I've been studying actually sort of from a comparative capitalism perspective Eastern Europe for a long time. And I think ever since the beginning of my PhD, which was a long time ago also, I was frustrated with this notion of post-socialism. You know, this idea that we are always looking at it and approaching it from this notion of post-socialism, which I think, you know, with the time passing makes less and less sense. But I want to actually reiterate here now, and I will talk more about my research anyway in the afternoon, what Ellie was saying about the teaching. I mean, currently, so I work within the University of Vienna in the area of comparative politics of Eastern and Southeastern Europe, something like that. And I know that, you know, kind of I derive my living out of this division and of this specialization, you know, and I think Vienna is also a place for various reasons, from post-colonial to whichever has a specific interest in the region. But I increasingly, so I teach a lot of courses about Eastern Europe in different combinations. And I increasingly find it very difficult to sort of justify to myself and to my students why we even have these specific courses, no? I mean, it makes sense because they still don't know a lot about the region, so this is a way for them to learn it. But then usually, you know, in the beginning I ask them, what associations they have with the notion of Eastern Europe, and then usually someone, of course, the first thing is post-socialism, and then all the other stuff comes in, populism, corruption, whatever, usually nothing very, bright. But I look at them, and some of them are undergrads, which means that they were born around 2000, so they were born 20 years after the fall of the Berlin Wall. And sometimes I also feel like a little bit of a historian when I have to explain some of these socialist legacies and so on. But I'm thinking, for these people, and they are, the future, as Ellie was saying, it really doesn't make too much sense to actually have this kind of divisions or to actually have these kind of notions of, post-socialist countries or specific historical trajectory or whatnot. And the other day, actually, in a conversation with the students, I said that I feel now that it's a little bit as if, in 1980, someone would be studying Germany as a post-Nazi country, and exclusively from that perspective and sort of putting it just in a comparative context with other post-Nazi countries. So I feel that also for the teaching purposes, I think we really need to sort of move beyond this and start producing research that will enable us to also design courses that can just ignore or dismantle. I completely agree with Timothy, this kind of divide. Thanks. Thanks a lot for organizing this. I'm really enthusiastic about the project.
Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is James Ball. I'm a Politics and International Relations undergraduate at the University of Southampton. So it's slightly daunting being around so many wonderful academics. Well, what can I say? I have a massive passion for Central and Eastern European politics, and specifically the Western Balkans and the post-Soviet region. I'm doing some work with some institutions in Kosovo and Kazakhstan at the moment. And just to comment on that kind of Western bias against Eastern Europe. So I'm an undergraduate. I talk to fellow undergraduates, and when I tell them I've been to Bosnia, for example, they go, "Oh, isn't there a war there?" No, I and they were born after the war. Or when I say I've been to Serbia, they say, "Oh, isn't that really dangerous?" No, Belgium is more dangerous. And things like that. So obviously as an undergraduate, I'm in way above my head here, but I look forward to talking with all of you and seeing what fruitful discussions come of this.
Thank you very much. It was actually really nice to hear undergraduate, the mythical students. Is there anyone else who would like to share thoughts or don't feel obliged or anything, but maybe, yeah, sure.
And then I will have 2 quick reactions, and then we will go for coffee. Don't worry, we will not miss
I will be quick. Thank you very much for all of your comments, and you're absolutely right from every perspective. Since I'm based in Prague and living in the Czech Republic, I literally agree with the view that there is no any more division. There is a broken system that we need to understand in general in the European Union and the European Union made as a project. We'll see. What I would like to share of the radical thinking coming from my own background and my own research I did in this field. I was invited to join the academic world by me producing analysis and PhD at the end on EU anti-corruption policy and anti-corruption, but if I only select cases from the Western Balkans. I did that, but my pursuit for knowledge take me to another levels, and that is massive indicators of corruption within the European Union. And when we talk about the background story that no one is willing to even address these issues, it is corrupt system, and it is some embeddedness of what has been happening in this past 30 years, and we have and can see this in many different variances, whether you name them as crisis, whether you name them as the need for emergency politics that we will discuss tomorrow. It is behind something deviances, some deviances have been happening for so long. And these cases, and I have found them, and I have been getting also trying to spread the word outside through publishing that there are so many indicators now in France, in UK, not to mention Italy. The rise of populism behind is also behind that story. The backsliding of democracy, it's not only relevant for 2 countries, Poland and Hungary. They are the most obvious of some authoritarian regimes, but this sort of crisis, it's not about crisis in general, just to be mentioned some terms and clusters. It's a crisis of how we think about what the citizens think as well, how they're engaged in politics, whether engaged in politics, how to engage them. So there's so many clusters currently with innovative democratic instruments working on direct democracy somewhere out there. There's someone out there working on populism. Somewhere also some divisions between quantitative, qualitative analysis. The thing is that all of them are working in the same direction to explain, for example, quantitative data, they are indicators, which then we as a qualitative scholars pick up and we say, this is a proof that there is a crisis in this country, and then we go and investigate further. So there are plenty of opportunities to cooperate also in these divisions. But just to mention, the European Union also understanding this, it's also part of such global interaction currently. And somehow I have a feeling that everything that wasn't, or was like 30 years ago, again, was pushed into the corners, into some mainstream, in order not to address some bigger questions. Now it's open up. And not only in the European Union, but everywhere around the world. So you cannot hold so many risks outside in order to protect your well-being and your wealth somewhere on the territory. You have to address them. So I hope that with this radical thinking that we will also explore the opportunities and say some things out loud. It's not easy to say that there's also corruption in France. It wasn't been easy for me as well, but we have to say them. Maybe not the same level. Of course, there are variances. Of course, there are many stories to be told, but there is something that is very dominant, and we have to address that. So thank you, and I hope we will continue for the coffee break.
Thank you. I will just make a very quick intervention, and I will not get in the way of coffee. Two things just to react to what Timothy Gartinash was saying. When we were thinking about the name of the network, one of the proposed titles was Challenging East-West Divides. But we in the end settled for Rethinking Europe's East-West Divide with the attempt, so we are trying to perhaps bridge the divide between scholars, but at the same time challenge our understanding of both regions. So I think that these are excellent points that we'll need to clarify and touch on. And this leads us back to the diversity that we have in this room. This is not an exclusively political science club. We are very much keen to bring scholars from various different disciplines, have interest from journalists, scholars of journalism, legal scholars, anthropologists, history, law, international relations. But in essence, what we are trying to do, and I think Julia was touching on it before, is here we are very much preaching to the choir, but recruiting and bringing allies from scholars who are comfortable just to reside within Western European studies is very, very important. So that's why we settled on rethinking Europe's East-West divide, but you're absolutely right. I mean, again, there is no Central and Eastern Europe, so to speak, as it's imagined in this homogeneous entity out there. If there is anything, it's defined by how diverse it is, how rapidly changing it is. And this is my last point, that is very, very important to challenge not just outdated, but lazy stereotypes. And I think the vision yours was very interesting. I've asked exactly the same question in this room when I started teaching politics of Central and Eastern Europe. And the first comment that I got was cheap labor. So just to give you a context of what comes to mind. And then the second one was brutalist architecture. And on this note, as an Eastern European who always feels at home here, I would like to usher you to the Helder Best building, which is a jewel of brutalist architecture. It has also won the award by the UK's Roofing Society, having had extensive renovations done, and enjoy coffee and biscuits. And we will reconvene again at 11.
Thank you.